time to follow my instructions as I put together another Wendell Wallace production with college football and the NFL right around the bend. It's time for my spoken words and opinion on those sports to begin. Wendell's World in Sport, the podcast as strong as James Harrison, scaring them more than Ray Lewis did the opposition, and like Charles Oliveira, putting my competition into complete submission. I go on a podcasting offensive like Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills with a plethora of talent and skills, breaking the wills of my competitors like Georgia's defense did last season with a style and fashion that is oh so pleasing. I give my thoughts and opinions on the everyday of the NFL and football of college with the knowledge to appease the sport talk listener with ease. You think your podcast is better than mine? Child, please. My style is as tasty and delicious as a ribeye steak while you're just baloney. Your act is whacked and incredibly phony. You stick to my podcast like that, I'll tell you the same damn thing that the sexy Jay Cargill tells Tony.
Cut the shit.
Wendell's World in Sports. Watch, listen, follow, subscribe, rate, review, and most importantly, enjoy anywhere, anyhow, anyway you listen to your favorite podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the most unique, entertaining, and compelling sports talk podcast you'll ever listen to.
Let's be great. Let's be great.
Wendell's World in Sports with the one and only Wendell Wallace.
Giannis charging down the lane to the rim, double clutch, no good, tipped in. Giannis tipped it home.
Subscribe, rate, and review anywhere and everywhere you listen to this and all your favorite podcasts. And now, from Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Rip, Roaring, and ready to rumble, Wendell Wallace.
Oh, it's been a long time. I shouldn't have kept you another strong podcast to step to. Think of how many weak podcasts you slept through. Well, time's up, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I kept you. Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. A lot of things to get down on and discuss today in the world of sports. Good morning, good abend, bonjour, bonsoir, que pasa, shalom, wassalamu alaikum, namaste, konnichiwa. Wendell's World in Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. A lot of things to get down on and discuss today in the world of sports. I want to thank you so much. Special dedication for those who are watching this podcast episode on YouTube. If you would just do me the favor, if you could just go ahead, if you like what you see. Again, speaking to the single ladies who look good between the ages of 42 and 49. All of the sports fans out there, regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of sexual orientation. If you like this episode, if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go ahead and leave a like for this video. Go ahead and leave a comment. I would very much appreciate it if you could do so. Most importantly, as always, enjoy the most unique, entertaining, thought-provoking sports talk podcast that you can listen to. Again, I would very much appreciate it. And if you want to go ahead and check out what I'm talking about on my podcast audio episodes, just go over to anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast, iHeart, iTunes, Spotify, Apple, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcast program. If you could just go ahead and follow, subscribe, download, rate, review. Most importantly, as always, as I always say, enjoy. Most importantly, the most unique, entertaining, thought-provoking sports talk podcast that you can listen to. Again, I would very much appreciate it. Wendell's World of Sports with yours truly, Wendell Wallace, back in the saddle again. Man, I tell you, when you start school, when you start back on that endeavor, I had for the summer, in terms of doing my podcast, I had everything all planned out to the routine, because as I mentioned before, during the summer, you're not going to work in terms of working for the school district. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they all seem the same. So I got myself into a routine of having a lot of things that I could do in terms of getting myself ready to prepare for a podcast. So everything fell into place once I got that groove going. Now that I'm back in school, now that I'm traveling about 180 miles round trip, 2 or 3 days a week, now that I'm going to be spending some time up in Mesquite away from my studio here in the northwest area of Las Vegas, Nevada, I got to go ahead and, make some adjustments and do some things. But these video or these audio podcasts or the video podcasts on my YouTube channel will be coming out every week. That I promise in the beginning of the week, because football is right around the corner. We're starting the preseason of football right now. I'm not going to be getting too much into the preseason football. I might make a comment or two, but for the most part, I don't put too much stock. I don't put too much emphasis on the preseason of the NFL. And if you're a follower of my podcast, first of all, thank you so much. Special dedication to you. But if you listen to me when I speak about what's happening with the NFL, we always have other podcasts, other shows and such, overreaction Monday. For me, that kind of lengthens to just months. I mean, after the first 4 weeks, after the first 8 weeks, sometimes even after the first 12 weeks, we don't know. You don't know. I don't know. We don't know in terms of what teams are going to be doing what, in terms of what teams are going to be championship material, in terms of a few of the elite teams that are going to be vying for the championship for real. We might have a good idea, but in terms of the NFL season being so fluid because of such things as injuries, because of such things as momentum, we don't know. In October, we don't know. In November, we don't know. And sometimes even in December, we don't know. So for me, I don't get it. If I'm not going to be paying too much attention in terms of who's doing what and who's going to be great and who's doing lousy and this is going to be hurting their Super Bowl chances, and this means that they're going to be done for trying to make the playoffs and all that type of stuff. If I'm not really going to be getting into that and talking about that ad nauseum in October and November, what makes you think I'm going to go ahead and take any type of clues or take any type of things out, or routines, or problems, possible problems or solutions in the preseason? The Dallas Cowboys against the Denver Broncos had 17 penalties. That's horrible. That's terrible. What do you think of it? Okay, well, I mean, we're speaking about the game, if you're a Cowboy fan, against the Denver Broncos. Okay, how many of those penalties were created, or how many of those penalties were made by players who were playing for the Cowboys who, A, won't even be on the squad when the regular season starts, or B, if they are going to be on the squad, they're going to have minimal impact on whether the Dallas Cowboys reach their goals, their expectations for the season. Now, if this was maybe a regular season and we saw 17 penalties, then yeah, maybe we could go ahead and talk about it in earnest in terms of that could possibly maybe be a problem down the road. But in preseason football, I'm not going in there. The performances of Trey Lance for the San Francisco 49ers against the Green Bay Packers, it was preseason football. Preseason football. If Trey Lance went out there and threw for 500 yards, it's preseason football. If Trey Lance went out there and threw for 7 interceptions, it's preseason football. Not going to be getting into it. The San Francisco 49ers, who have aspirations of winning the Super Bowl, one of the teams that should be considered possibilities to win the Super Bowl. I'm not going to be bringing anything in a preseason football game and taking it over to the argument of, is this team going to be legit Super Bowl contenders based on a preseason football game in mid-August? Not going to go there. Not going to be doing that. So, look, man, in case something happens in terms of an injury, or what I'll be getting into in just a second, a suspension, not really too much into preseason football. Zach Wilson is going to be out somewhere between 2 or 4 weeks with the New York Jets. What does that mean for the New York Jets? Well, it means that the development of Zach Wilson might have to be slowed a little bit. But if you're the New York Jets this season, even with the additions that they had through free agency and in the draft, you really don't expect the New York Jets to go ahead and do anything, do you? I mean, the loss of Zach Wilson in terms of what it's going to mean and how impactful it's going to mean on the win-loss record, the chances of the New York Jets overachieving, I mean, you really aren't going to buy too much stock into that if you're a New York Jet fan. Yeah, if you're the New York Jets. Yeah, if you're the Houston Texans. Yeah, if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yeah, if you're the Detroit Lions. Yeah, if you're the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, if you're the Chicago Bears. You want to repeat what the Cincinnati Bengals did last year. You want to be one of those teams where it seems like every single season going into the NFL football season, and I've talked about this before, where one of the great things about the NFL is that we're always going to have at least one team which is going to be picked to be at the bottom, which is going to be picked to be doing nothing, which is going to be picked to not have any type of impact on what's going to be happening in terms of playoffs or division titles or Super Bowl aspirations and such. There's a team that we're always going to dismiss with good reason. There's a team that's going to be coming off the season before where they were in last place. We're going to be speaking about a team that we're going to bury because of the year that they had last year or the year before or the year before that. And they're going to surprise. No greater example than the Cincinnati Bengals. As I mentioned before, the Cincinnati Bengals came into the 2021 season with a situation where, hey, man, Zach Wilson, the head coach of the Bengals, he was on one of the hotter hot seats for coaches. Nobody, absolutely nobody, expected the Cincinnati Bengals to do what they did, but yet and still, they did. So as I speak here, as I'm recording this on the afternoon of Thursday, August, what day is this? 18th, 2022. Which team? There's going to be one of these teams. I'm not saying that the Houston Texans, I'm not saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm not saying that the Chicago Bears all of a sudden going to win the Super Bowl or even come close to what the Cincinnati Bengals did, which was coming a few minutes short of winning the Super Bowl. But one of these teams, whether it's the New York Jets, one of these teams, whether it's the Seattle Seahawks, one of these teams, whether it's the Chicago Bears, where we look at them on paper before the season starts and we say there is no way talent-wise, experience-wise, that they're going to have what it takes to do anything. One of these teams is going to be vying for the playoffs come November. One of these teams are going to be vying for first place in their division in November and December. Which one is it going to be? I don't know. I can't see the Houston Texans with the situation they have at quarterback, with Lovie Smith coming back as the head coach after a failed experience coaching the University of Illinois. I can't see the Jacksonville Jaguars overcoming the mess and the destruction that Urban Meyer had on that franchise in terms of them going forward to try to be playoff contenders, for them to be legitimate a playoff contender. I can't see Doug Peterson turning that program around all in 1 year. I can't see Trevor Lawrence making the type of progression that's going to take him from where he was near the end of the Urban Meyer era to being where he was going to be a quarterback that can lead a team to a playoff situation or lead a team to a Super Bowl situation. I can't see it. But yet and still, one of these storylines for one of these teams is going to play out that way. I don't know what the Chicago Bears situation could be to where they would be contenders if you take a look at their wide receiving position, if you take a look at the skills at the running back position, if you take a look at that weak offensive line, if you take a look at the losses that they had on defense, if you take a look at the new regime that's coming in, if you take a look at the poor job that the new general manager did in terms of putting the team together to surround Justin Fields, there's no scenario that I can see. So what's the scenario? Well, let me tell you, Fife and Q-Tip, I can't see any situation where the Chicago Bears are going to be able to win more than 3 or 4 games. Just can't see it. But yet and still, whether it's going to be them, whether it's going to be the Fighting Dan Campbells of Detroit, whether it's going to be Pete Carroll one more time turning the corner with the Seattle Seahawks despite the loss of Russell Wilson, one of these teams is going to surprise. And along with gambling and along with the violence of it and the nature of only a couple of days a week, that's what makes the NFL so great. That's what makes the NFL so fantastic. In the NBA, we have a pretty good idea when the season starts. As much as I love the NBA, as much as the NBA is my Halle Berry, is my Layla Roshan, is my Monica Bellucci, is my Selma Hayek, is the love of my life. You're speaking about the NBA along with the Georgetown Hoyas. As much as I love and defend the NBA because of my love and passion for it, for the most part, we know which teams are going to be good. We know which teams are going to be bad. In the NBA, there is no example that can be given to what the Cincinnati Bengals did, or there's no example in the NBA that can equate to what the Cincinnati Bengals did last season by being doormats the season before. And we're speaking about a franchise in Cincinnati that has long been considered inept and incompetent and dysfunctional and in the dregs, when we're speaking about them being really Super Bowl or conference championship contenders for years and years and years and decades. And then with the acquisition of Jamar Chase, and then with the ascension of Joe Burrow, who, by the way, was coming off a serious injury in his rookie year when he was sacked by Chase Young in a game against the now Washington Commanders. There was no evidence that the Cincinnati Bengals were going to do what they did, but yet still they did. In the NBA, that doesn't happen. We know going into this season that there is no pathway realistically for the Sacramento Kings to win an NBA championship. None. We know right now in the Eastern Conference that one of the teams that will not be playing for the NBA championship because they won the Eastern Conference is the Indiana Pacers. We know that. No question about it. Now, at the top, You have the Golden State Warriors. You have the Phoenix Suns. In the Eastern Conference, you have the Milwaukee Bucks. You have the Boston Celtics. So what you're speaking about 2 or 3 or 4 teams that every single year, more than likely, is going to be playing for the championship, is going to be winning the championship in the NBA. We know this. But going into that season, those are the teams that are going to be prognosticated to win the championship. Not the Sacramento Kings, not the Indiana Pacers, not the Orlando Magic, not the Houston Rockets. You can't do that with the NFL. You can't completely dismiss all those bottom feeder teams because history shows that more than likely one of those teams is going to surprise. Which one of those teams? I don't know, man. I have no idea. I don't see any pathway for the teams that I just mentioned in the NFL that are supposed to be filling out last place in their division, in their conferences. I don't see any type of pathway, but one of them is going to do it, and it's going to be very interesting when they do, which makes, again, the NFL, along with other things, so fantastic. Wendell's World of Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. All right. Let me go ahead and get to the Deshaun Watson situation. As you remember that an arbitrator or the ruling at the beginning for Deshaun Watson in terms of his suspension from the Cleveland Browns was first at 6 games for basically being a creep, basically having himself involved in very creepy and very disgusting behavior. 6 games, huge outrage. This is disappointing. This is terrible. This is horrible. All those things. The NFL saw an opportunity for them to improve their PR. The NFL saw an opportunity for them to ingratiate themselves to women's groups and others. So in the collective bargaining agreement that they had with the Players Association, they had the situation where, yes, for the punishment that a third party can go ahead and do this. Judge Sue Robinson judged that Deshaun Watson would be suspended for 6 games. But if the NFL does not like the suspension, that they can appeal the decision and then send it to an arbitrator for him or her or whoever to go ahead and decide on a new ruling or decide on a verdict or one of those things. And that's one of the things that they did with Deshaun Watson. The NFL said to themselves, ooh, hey, they put their finger in their mouth and then they put it in the air. They said, ooh, hey, guess what? There's been great outrage. This is a situation for us once again to, put ourselves in the good graces of the Me Too movement and all these folks who are saying the NFL is misogynistic and all these type of things. This is our way to get some good PR. Because as I mentioned before, even before with the beginning, when this first started in terms of the possible punishment for Deshaun Watson, and I spoke about, and I gave the thoughts and opinions about, with the ruling over the summer of Roe v. Wade being cut down or being taken off the law books federally, and we're speaking about bringing it to the states and how that was a big blow for the women's movement and for women's rights, taking away their rights. How would the NFL in this situation maybe use the outrage, use the temperature of the decision of Roe v. Wade to possibly come in when it comes to a Deshaun Watson, when you're speaking about a guy who basically was a couple of levels below physically raping these women, to go ahead and plan out a suspension or go ahead and react to a suspension. So when they got 6 games, so when Deshaun Watson got 6 games, again, it was, hey, man, let's go ahead and appeal. And within less than 48 hours, they went ahead and appealed. So Deshaun Watson got his new decision today. The NFL and the NFL Players Association on Thursday reached a settlement in the Deshaun Watson disciplinary matter, agreeing that the Cleveland Browns quarterback will serve an 11-game suspension without pay after he was accused by more than 24 women of sexual misconduct during massage sessions. Watson will also pay a fine of $5 million and undergo mandatory evaluation by behavioral experts and follow their suggested treatment programs. Okay, this thing is over. Let's go ahead and get the suspension over with. Now look, I wasn't there. I wasn't privy to all the creepy, nasty, disgusting things that Deshaun Watson did. But in a situation like that, I really didn't need to. I'm going to take the words of the women that he molested, assaulted, whatever you wanted to do, whatever you wanted to say, however you want to define what he did legally or layman's terms, what he did. What he did was very creepy. What he did was wrong. What he did was disgusting. What he did should be punishable. I was one who said 6 games, very light. 6 games, not enough. But I was also one that said, hey, look, this is the NFL that we're talking about. And just like life, and a lot of things, and a lot of times, and I'm discussing this here on Wendell's World of Sports podcast with yours truly, Wendell Wallace. A lot of times when we go ahead and we speak about these things in terms of something coming down on the side of misogynistic, on the side of racist, some type of ruling on that, or some type of decision on that, whether it be just in the everyday lives of people at your workplace, at the judicial level of this country. A lot of times, especially when we're speaking about sports and when we're speaking about the NFL, who again has had a very poor history when it comes to these things in terms of their treatment of women. If you see stories written, I mean, we always, first of all, like to put a lot of the players or the NFL acting badly. We like to shine the spotlight on the players. If you take a look at Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, where he was getting his happy endings at a Florida massage parlor shop or whatever. When you're speaking about the indiscretions in the weaknesses, the foibles, the personal foibles of Jim Irsay, when you speak about just the utter nonsense of Dan Snyder and the situation that he has, his stewardship leading the Washington, then Redskins, then football team, now Commanders, and you take a look at some of the treatment and you take a look at some of the things and misdeeds and misconduct that he's done as the owner of the Washington franchise, basically torpedoing generations of goodwill, generations of strong ties, bond, love, passion for that football team. From a man who grew up in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the DMV, Maryland born, Maryland bred, and when I die, I'll be Maryland dead. If I'm lucky, if God is on my side, I'll spend my final years in Albany, Maryland. Leisure World, baby. Back to what I'm talking about. Basically, what I'm saying is I grew up on Joe Theismann. I grew up on the Hogs. I grew up on Joe Gibbs. I grew up on Doug Williams. I grew up on Art Monk. I grew up on Gary Clark. I grew up on the Washington football team's tradition. And it became embedded, not just in my household, but when you're speaking not just in the Washington, in the Maryland, Washington, Northern Virginia area. Before the Carolina Panthers, before it became the Carolina Panthers, they were fans of the Washington football team. North Carolina, South Carolina, places there, Richmond, Virginia, the state of Virginia. I mean, because of the greatness, because of Joe Gibbs, how he rescued that franchise, how Jake Kent Cook, despite being a miserable, horrible, awful human being, look him up. Read his stories. Read how he was with his employees when he was the owner of the Los Angeles Lakers before he sold it to Jerry Buss. His racist, misogynistic ways. The guy was a piece of garbage, piece of trash. Burn in hell, Jack. Exactly where you belong. But as the owner of the Washington football team, hiring Joe Gibbs and bringing the Washington football team back to prominence, for them being one of the best teams of the 1980s, along with the New York Giants and the San Francisco 49ers. Having the importance of that team after George Allen in the 70s took them to a Super Bowl, the over-the-hill gang. And before that, there was years and decades of nothing. And the embarrassment now, as we see it, is George Preston Marshall, another guy who I hope is burning in hell for all eternity for his racist ways. How he was the last owner to have his team integrate or have a black player on his team when he traded for Bobby Mitchell. That legacy, Joe Gibbs saving the Washington football team, bringing them to the stature to where my generation and a generation after me and a generation before me just fell in love with the team and really became a hallmark embedded into the Washington community. And now we see what Daniel Snyder has done. We've seen the destruction that Daniel Snyder has done. We've seen the disappointment and the embarrassment of what the Washington Commanders are now, how they're irrelevant, how they're a joke, and how I'm dreaming, praying to God or everybody else that somehow, some way Daniel Snyder can get out of there as the owner of the Washington football teams. I don't care if we have to marry and bury that clown to get him out of there. I don't care if we have to Donald Sterling that clown to get him out of there. I don't care what it takes outside of some type of physical harm to the man. Something needs to be done to get him out of there. My point is that when we speak about the NFL and we speak about their transgressions outside of the owners in terms of their hiring practices of head coaches, of black folks, which I'm quite sure there's a lot in this country really don't see that as a big deal, which is their fault, which is their foolishness, which is their ignorance. For the most part, the bad press or the negative press all falls on the players. They all go to the players. When a player acts stupid, when a player acts badly, when a player punches a girl, when a player is involved in dogfighting, when a player deflates a football, when a player is caught using performance-enhancing drugs, when a player is caught driving while intoxicated, when a player goes to Georgia and sexually assaults a girl, and now in this situation when a player, a marquee player, a well-known player, a high-profile player, does what Deshaun Watson did. Speaking about Deshaun Watson, yes, the spotlight, the bad news, the bad press is going to be shown right on those guys. So I get it. I understand it. That 6 games was not sufficient in terms of what the punishment should have been for Deshaun Watson. But at the same time, it was almost like, look, man, this is the NFL. And I've said this so many times when it came to Deshaun Watson. When they first started the investigation, when they first started the progress and started the investigation to see how many games he would be suspended, and people were clamoring for a season and all these type of things. I just said, hey, look, man. I mean, you know what country we live in. You know what type of society we live in. You know what we're dealing with. 6 games for Deshaun Watson. The NFL could have gotten away without punishing him at all. And nothing would have happened. And I've said this over and over again. And for those who are just checking out my podcast, let me explain my thoughts and opinions about this whole Deshaun Watson deal. Just like any other player who gets in trouble, no matter how horrible, no matter how egregious, no matter how disgusting, no matter how despicable it is. If the guy can play his road back to redemption, if the man can play, and if the man can help your team win, and if the man fulfills what he needs to do to live up to the expectations that you have of this player when he is on your team, that speaks miles and miles and miles more than what anything he can do to atone for his mistakes or his actions, his negative actions outside of the stadium, outside of the football field. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Deshaun Watson made first he apologized. Sorry, one of these things, if I hurt anybody, my bad. First, he started off with, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I don't get why everybody's so upset. I don't understand why I'm under investigation. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I'm a good guy. I'm a God-fearing guy. I'm a great guy. I've never done this. I would never do anything like this. This is horrible. This is terrible. So he went from just straight up plain denial. I didn't do anything. I'm guilty of nothing. Essentially, what he's saying is all these women are lying. I don't know if it's collusion. I don't know why, but trust me, all these women are lying. He went from that to, if I hurt anybody, my bad. Well, if you didn't do anything wrong, what are you talking about? If these women are coming to the center, if these women are coming out of the darkness into the light, and they're going public, and they're talking about the details, or they're going in court and talking about the experience that they had with you and the massage session, and they're talking about all of the disgusting things that you did to them, why are you going to apologize? So basically, if you're apologizing, Deshaun, to the women, then basically what you're admitting to is, yes, that these things that these women are talking about are true, which then makes you a liar, because before that you said that no way, no how that I could be guilty of any of these accusations that these women are bringing against me. So if you go ahead and you say, I'm sorry, that means that you, on some level, did these things, which makes you a creep, which makes you kind of still icky, yucky, Chesterish. I don't know what to call it. So he goes from that, which is basically him trying to save his ass, especially when he's made this I'm so sorry if I hurt anybody type of statement after the NFL said that they were going to appeal the 6-game suspension. After the suspension came out, you didn't hear Deshaun Watson. After the initial suspension came out, you didn't hear Deshaun Watson say anything in terms of, oops, I'm sorry. Everything, I'm quite sure him and the Browns organization were like, phew, thank goodness, only 6 games. We have a chance. The NFL said we're going to appeal the scuttlebutt, the talking points, the discussions, people talking on the Shannon the Skip show and the First Take show and the Mike Greenberg show and the Nick Wright show and on the ESPNs and on the Fox Sports and everywhere else. We're speaking about, well, the NFL is going to appeal. It's going to go to another decision. NFL is pushing for a year-long suspension. Obviously, that's probably going to be the outcome of the new punishment. That's when Deshaun Watson said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, whoever I hurt, this, that, and the other. I'm sorry." Comes out to be now 11 games, and then Deshaun Watson goes back to, "I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know what I did wrong. He went back to, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm sorry that the ones that I hurt, the suspension came out, set in stone, we agreed to it. I don't know what I did wrong. They negotiated. I didn't do anything wrong. I'll take the 11 games. I didn't do anything wrong." You did something wrong, Deshaun. Now, I don't know when we can start getting into how is this going to play out in terms of, well, what does this mean for the Cleveland Browns? What does this mean? When is it now going to be a good time to be speaking about, well, he's going to be missing 11 games. So if the Browns with Jacoby Brissett can get to 7-4, 6-5, 5-6, Deshaun Watson to the rescue, Browns have a chance. The Browns still have a chance. So, woo! We dodged a bullet. When can we get into that discussion? And how much time do we need to discuss the suspension itself? How much time do we need to do this? Now, the MSNBCs of the world, the women's groups of the world, the Me Too movements of the world, they're going to have their elongated discussions and thoughts and comments about this. Fine. Good. Bring it on. The conversation needs to be told. And I'm quite sure they're going to say 11 games is not enough. It's a slap in the wrist. He should have been suspended for the entire season. The fines should have been more. He should have had to face more dire consequences, because he might not have been getting paid this season, or he's not going to be getting paid. He faces a $5 million fine, but Deshaun Watson is going to be all right financially. And when his suspension is over and the season's over and the 2023 season starts, he's going to start getting paid. And he's getting 5 years, he signed a contract, 5 years, $230 million. 5 years, $230 million. And even though there's going to be some money that is going to be missing because of his suspension, he's still going to be able to recoup that money. Or at the very least, we can say that unless Deshaun Watson is stupid beyond belief, that he's going to have enough money to live the rest of his life on based on this contract. So it goes to the punishment phase. Man, a lot of people are sitting up there are angry because when we speak about Deshaun Watson, when we speak about he needed to be suspended more, he needed to be punished more, my thoughts and feelings are, what should the suspension be? How long should it be? And you realize that outside of banning this man from the game, he's still going to win in life. And when we speak about life, we're speaking about financial prosperity, right? I mean, a lot of us are living paycheck to paycheck, right? A lot of us want that generational wealth, right? A lot of us are going to be working into our 60s and our 70s and then our 80s. How many times when we go into a grocery store? How many times do we go to Sam's Club? How many times do we go to the store or something like that, and we see senior citizens still working to continue to live? Not because they're bored, not because they want to get out of the house. A lot of our seniors, not just in this country, but in this world, are working because they need the money. Whether it be their fault, government's fault, company's fault, where they work fault, bad spend, whatever. Breaks my heart when I see somebody in their 60s, in their 70s, in their 80s still having to work, delivering pizzas, still having to work at the grocery store, bagging groceries, still having to work sweeping up the floors at the end of the day at the company that they work for, at the store that they work for. It breaks my heart because senior citizens shouldn't be living like that. I don't give a damn what they did outside of committing crimes. If you pay your dues, if you work hard, if you make it, man, if you make it to be 70-something years old, if you make it to be 80 years old, that right there, do you know how hard it is to make it? Do you know how hard it is living every day to make it to that age? Do you know how lucky, do you know how fortunate you have to be to reach that age? If you get to that age, man, you shouldn't have to be working. You shouldn't have to be doing all those things. But that's reality of life. That's what we're dealing with. Deshaun Watson doesn't ever have to deal with that unless, again, he's a complete moron. Oh, and by the way, with that pension that he's going to be getting from the NFL, he's never going to have to be worried about money. Never. You're not going to see Deshaun Watson working at Trader Joe's bagging groceries. You're not going to see him at Smith's or Albertsons or Safeway's bagging groceries. If you order a pizza from Pizza Hut or Papa John or Domino's, you're not going to see Deshaun Watson driving up in his 5-year-old car with 105,000 miles on it, delivering your pizza and begging for you to give him 10% or 15% of a tip. So in a situation like that, we want to see Deshaun Watson being punished, but there's no punishment that some people are going to be able to be happy with because Deshaun Watson is still going to be making a generational wealth. He's going to be staying out of prison. I don't know, as far as settlements are concerned, how much money these women received for having to endure such humiliation and such horrible conditions with Deshaun Watson. But Deshaun Watson's going to be okay. So when we speak about punishment, when we speak about this should be done, that should be done, these should be done, those should be done to Deshaun Watson, I don't know what the answer is. You can't ban the man. You can't ban the man from doing something, from being employed. Playing football, that's his job. That's what he does. I know people look at it like because of the money they make and the stature and the spotlight and everything that comes with playing football in the NFL, that they should be banned from the game. Well, if Deshaun Watson was washing dishes at the local mom and pop place selling, that sells burgers and fries in euros, should he be banned from working? If Deshaun Watson were just a white sock wearing 8 to 5 clock punching humanoid who was up there making about 12, 14, 15 bucks an hour, and he was accused of these things, should he lose his job? Should he be banned from being able to work? If you ban Deshaun Watson, the man's going to have to do something. You want the man to be homeless? You want the man not to have any money? What do you want Deshaun Watson to do? You want him to be thrown in jail? All right, how long do you want him to be thrown in jail? So these are the type of discussions and then we're speaking about, we can also bring out, possibilities. And this is, as I mentioned before, when we start discussing this and when we start trying to figure out how to part and put in different categories what Deshaun Watson did, let's talk about it, how it impacts society, what we're going to do, women's rights, all these type of things, crime and justice punishment, all of these things that come with the decision of Deshaun Watson, what he did and everything like that, the reaction from the public and everything like that, move that over to that side and let those folks who want to talk about it, and we should listen because we need to grow. We need to be more educated on these type of things. We need to have a better understanding because, again, it's going to be helping women, moving the women's movement, getting them closer to equality, which in turn can turn this world into a much better place because we need women right now at a much higher a level of existence and respect than they are right now, along with blacks, along with Asians, along with Hispanics, along with other groups of minority folks, whether it be Muslims, whether it be gay, lesbians. But women are part of that movement. Women are part of that group to where the Deshaun Watson situation, the Deshaun Watson case, the Deshaun Watson punishment, this whole Deshaun Watson crime and justice show that the NFL and others put on to where we came to the conclusion end of the program concerning the crime and justice episode of Deshaun Watson. 11 games, suspended 11 games, $5 million fine, move that over, let's talk about football. That's over with, that's done. No more appeals, no more, could this happen, could that happen? None of that. That's all gone. That's all that's now over here. So let society take that portion of it, and let's talk about that, and let's grow, let's educate, let's talk about it. But what about the football aspect over here? Crime and justice, Deshaun Watson, life lessons, all that stuff. Right here, let's talk about the Cleveland Browns winning football games. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns trying to survive. Let's now talk about the silliness of the impact of Deshaun Watson to say, well, how is that going to affect the football team? 11 games. Do the Cleveland Browns go out and get themselves Jimmy Garoppolo? Not for 11 games. They're going to put their trust in Jacoby Brissett and hope to Jesus that man doesn't get injured. Keep us afloat. 6-5, we'll take it. 5-6, we'll take it. And what does it mean for Deshaun Watson coming back after 11 games? Because you know what's going to happen. Folks who are going to be speaking about the impact that Deshaun Watson had in terms of being suspended and how that's going to affect the Cleveland Browns win-loss record, playoff chances, a team that when they acquired Deshaun Watson, automatically with the talent that they had around them, the acquisition of Amari Cooper and such, while Kareem Hunt is wanting to be traded, the best running back tandem in the NFL with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, offensive line doing well, now they got themselves the quarterback. And Deshaun Watson, not just any other quarterback, not just a quarterback who's ranked 8th or 10th or 12th or 15th. This isn't Kirk Cousins going to the Minnesota Vikings type of an acquisition for the Cleveland Browns by them getting Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is the guy who's supposed to be the quarterback that's going to take them to Super Bowls, opportunities, division championships, conference championships, year after year after year for the next 4, 5, 6, 7 years. This guy is supposed to be the cornerstone, the foundation of the Cleveland Browns being elite. A Cleveland Brown franchise organization that hasn't done jack diddly for the most part since Jim Brown led them to a championship in 1964, then losing 23-12 in the championship game next season up at Lambeau Field to Paul Hornung and Bart Starr and Jim Taylor and Vince Lombardi of the Green Bay Packers. Since 1965, with the exception of maybe Brian Sipe and Sam Retigliano, the Cleveland Browns have been garbage. The Cleveland Browns have been worthless, especially when you're speaking about recent times, the last 10 or 20 years. Whether you're speaking about coaches, players, quarterbacks, whatever. Deshaun Watson's the guy that's supposed to be changing all that. The Deshaun Watson era in Cleveland, the story should be written with Super Bowl appearances and Super Bowls. And what does that do for the NFL? What does that do for the Cleveland Browns organization? What does that do for Cleveland, Ohio? What does that do for the region of Cleveland or of Ohio, the state of Ohio, who love this football so much? That's the task. That's the responsibility for Deshaun Watson when he comes back. So when he comes back after week 11 and he rejoins the team and he takes over as being the starting quarterback of the NFL, of the Cleveland Browns, what do you want him to do? How should he come out the box? Do you give him a situation where the first 2 games going to be a little rusty because he hadn't played football in, I don't know, over a year and a half, getting back with a new team, all those type of things? You give him 2 games. Can you give him 2 games? If the Cleveland Browns are 5 or 6, 5 and 6, or 6 and 5, and they're battling with Baltimore and Cincinnati and Pittsburgh, can the Cleveland Browns afford to have Deshaun Watson, quote unquote, get his game legs down? So you give him 2 or 3 games. That could be the situation where the Cleveland Browns making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. That's the situation with Deshaun Watson. Everybody's going to expect to say, hey, Deshaun Watson's going to come back after week 11, and everybody's going to be speaking about that like the Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans the last time we saw him play. We don't know that. How do we know Deshaun Watson is going to be at that level? And if he's not, how close to that level is he going to be? And if not, how close to a level does he need to be for the Cleveland Browns to prosper after he comes back? Those are all the type of things when you're speaking about 2 completely different subjects in terms of, hey, man, what Deshaun Watson did, let's discuss this from a whole different perspective. We're not talking about his impact as a football player. We're not talking about him as a football player impacting his team's wins, loss, that type of thing. No, we're going to talk about this. That needs to be discussed. That needs to be talked about. That needs to be talked about. Yes. Hey, man, I'm not going to shut up and just throw a football. Those things need to be talked about. Now, I don't want those things to be talked about ad nauseum when I'm trying to watch football, of course. But those things should not be forgotten. Deshaun Watson, whatever happens to Deshaun Watson in terms of his play and his impact that he has on the football field when he comes back, not just for this season, but for seasons to come, this should not be based on this story in terms of what he did, the impact of what Deshaun Watson did, and the ramifications, and everything that went down with Deshaun Watson and these ladies. The impact of what Deshaun Watson did and how we discuss these things, how we use this to move forward in a positive way for our society. That should not be based on the way Deshaun Watson plays. No. I don't give a doggone if Deshaun Watson turns into Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, all into one. What he did should not be mitigated by that. What he did should not be lessened by that. And what he did should not be disrespected by his play. What he did, just like Ray Rice punching out his girl, just like Kareem Hunt, what he did caught on camera in Kansas City with a female. Greg Hardy, we can go on and on and on. Oh, and Daniel Snyder, Robert Kraft, and others. All those to be thrown into that pot to be discussed in terms of what can we do to elevate women, to help women even more, with women leading the way, to get them to a place, to get them to a level, to get them to a position in society where they are more respected and where they're given more opportunities. What can we use? What can we do with this Deshaun Watson deal? I hope that doesn't go away. But when you're speaking about this country, when you're speaking about this society, when you're speaking about other things going on, when you're speaking about this being an election year with the midterms, when you're speaking about all that stuff going down, and when you're speaking about all of the chaos, when you speak about all of the mishaps, when you speak about the topsy-turvy way that this country is right now, the way that we're headed, the way that we're going, certain civil war coming on between good and evil in this country. How much attention can we give to what Deshaun Watson did in terms of trying to help women move forward and help them? Should we just concentrate on, hey, let's just worry. I mean, punishment, serve, this, that, and the other. Now let's go ahead and talk football. We can go ahead and do both. I know this country has a hard time walking and chewing gum at the same time, but we need to do it. We need to try. Wendell's World in Sports, I'm your host. Wendell Wallace, so glad that you can be with us. It's the Deshaun Watson deal is something else, man. It is completely, unbelievably something else. I'm not going to. I'm just gonna go. I'm not going with any breaks. Not going with any music. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna rip, roar, and rumble when I'm speaking about, and I'll be out of here in about 15, 20 minutes, so y'all can go ahead and get on what you're doing with your lives. I wanted to speak a little bit about, some of the power rankings in the NFL coming out. And you got the Buffalo Bills, you got the Los Angeles Rams, you got the Cincinnati Bengals, you got the Green Bay Packers, you got the Tampa Town Buccaneers. You got all those teams coming out. And plenty of time to talk about those teams winning, losing, what they need to do, blah, 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 a lot of stuff. I spoke about the Buffalo Bills on the audio episode that you can check anywhere, iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. The podcast that I put out this past week was speaking about the Buffalo Bills, was speaking about Josh Allen should be the favorite to start the season to win the MVP. The elevation of Josh Allen to where he is right now, possibly, again, a bona fide MVP candidate in terms of leader of the pack. I spoke about the Buffalo Bills in terms of the weapons that they had. I talked about the quarterback wide receiver tandem of Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. Talked about the fact that the Bills' offensive line still needs a guard, still needs to be improved. But when you have someone as big and strong and mobile, Ben Roethlisberger 2.0, shall we say, if Roethlisberger was coming out of the MAC around this time, in this generation of football, he would be Josh Allen. But Josh Allen's strength, Josh Allen's imagination, Josh Allen's creativity can mask some of the deficiencies that the Bills have on the offensive line. Still think they're going to need a running back. Still think they need to go ahead and get them a guy who can carry the football 20, 25 times if need be. But the strength of the offense is Josh Allen. The more times you can have him throw the ball in the air, the better. But you still need a running game to offset that, and you still need an offensive line that's going to protect and do a better job. Defensive-wise, the Bills rearranged their whole front four. Von Miller coming in not just as a player of consequence in terms of the production that he can do on the football field, but also the leadership that he has off the football field. Stories about him really getting to Aaron Donald and really, pushing the button for him to be a more vocal leader, and how we helped Donald be the player that he was down the stretch, eventually becoming a Super Bowl champion. Aaron Donald, the most dominant player defensively in the NFL, and you can make a strong argument that he's the best player, regardless of offense, defense, quarterback, skill position, whatever, that he is the best player in the NFL. So Miller taking his talents to Buffalo, New York, for a revamped defensive line that was already pretty good. When you speak about some of the statistical stat categories in which they were first in points allowed, yards allowed, red zone defense and such. But with the overhaul that they had on the defensive line and bringing in new guys, quicker, stronger, faster, that type of thing. The secondary is still going to be good. Safety position is still going to be good. So the Bills should be set up to be serious contenders. Question the fact about, what's going to be happening with them in terms of the situation with losing like they did to the Kansas City football team, 42-36 in overtime. Is that going to have any type of, is that going to be any type of baggage? Is that going to be an anchor? Is that going to be added weight? Is that going to be something that we're not really paying attention to? Are they going to fold like the Atlanta Falcons did when they blew their opportunity to be great, losing a 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl against New England? Are they going to be like the Seattle Seahawks, who threw away their opportunity to become a mini dynasty by passing instead of handing the ball off to Marshawn Lynch? Now, I understand. Kansas City, Buffalo, that was divisional playoffs. Seattle, New England, Atlanta, New England, Super Bowl. I get it. A lot more gravity to that. But still, man, when you speak about that was a devastating loss. Devastating loss by the Buffalo Bills. And again, in the NFL, we always say, man, just because you had a great season one season or last season doesn't mean that you're automatically going to have another great season the season afterwards. The Minnesota Vikings of 1998 went 15-1. Lost in the NFC Championship game in overtime to the Atlanta Falcons 30-27. Gary Anderson missing a field goal that would have clinched the victory for those guys. The only time that season that he missed a field goal, Atlanta, Chris Chandler, Jamal Anderson came down, scored, tied the game, and then they won in overtime. The Minnesota Vikings under Randy Moss and Robert Griffith or Robert Smith and those guys, Chris Carter, those guys, they were never the same. Dennis Green, the head coach, they were never the same. Now with Dante Culpepper, they made it back to the NFC Championship game where they lost to the New York Giants, but a team that was a Gary Anderson field goal away from possibly winning a Super Bowl never recovered, and the Vikings never were able to get to the level of expectation that many people thought they would. Brian Billick goes to be the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens and such. Corey Springer, Corey, I forgot his name, but he died, the offensive lineman. But things happen. Randall Cunningham had that one good year, and that was about it. He emptied the tank on his career on that one. So things happen in the NFL. So what I'm trying to say is that just because Buffalo, who finished the season 11-6, the regular season 11-6, embarrassed the New England Patriots something fierce 47-17. At one time during that season, they were 7-6. During that season, they lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars. During that season, they got blown out by the Indianapolis Colts 41-15. They didn't win 2 games in a row until mid-December. So this wasn't a situation where the Bills were a juggernaut the entire way through. They just so happened at the right time to get hot by playing the patsies of the world like the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets and the New York Giants. We got that mojo, we got that engine, we got that motivation running for them to have the performance that they had against the New England Patriots before losing that game against the Kansas City football team. 13 seconds away from winning the game, and they couldn't stop Tyreek Hill. They couldn't stop Travis Kelce. They couldn't stop Patrick Mahomes, and that hurts, man. That's got to hurt. That's got to sting. Or should it? We'll find out. We won't find out in September. We won't find out in October. It'll be an accumulation of a situation like that. So there you go. Wendell's World of Sports. I'm your host, Wendell Wallace. So glad that you could be with us. Did a little tribute to Serena Williams, who's retiring after the U.S. Open. Spoke about mainly on my podcast, the audio episode, which you can check out on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, and Amazon. Basically what I said about that was, it's when we speak about the greatness of women athletes, we always like to categorize, excuse me, we always like to categorize them in terms of, well, how great were they as women's tennis players or women athletes? Like you have the greatest athletes of all time, then you have the greatest women's athletes of all time. And when we're speaking about the greatest athletes of all time, we are referring to men and men only. Then we have a separate distinction as terms of the greatest women athletes, depending upon your definition. Now, if you want to be silly and you want to be stupid and you want to be ignorant and you want to be knuckleheaded and a knuckle-dragging Neanderthal that didn't really want to participate in the 21st century, which we're in right now, you can sit there and use the same lame, stupid, ridiculous, idiotic, asinine argument to say you can't have women being equated with the greatest athletes of all time because naturally men are greater than women. Bigger, stronger, faster, athletic, blah, blah, blah. So because of that, that's the reason why we need two categories when we're speaking about the greatest athletes of all time. We're referring to men, and then the greatest women athletes of all time right over here. And these jackasses, when they start naming the greatest athletes of all time, some of them, depending upon their knowledge, some of them, depending upon their education, will go ahead with the Joe Lewises and the Jack Dempseys and the Jesse Owens and the Jackie Robinsons and the Sugar Ray Robinsons and the Rocky Marcianos and the Bobby Joneses, the golf, and they'll move their way up to Muhammad Ali and Kurt Flood and Willie Mays, and then they'll keep going on up and start naming Sugar Ray Leonard and Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and Larry Bird and John McEnroe and Yvonne Lendl and Bruce Jenner and Tommy Smith and John Carlos and Bob Beamer and Rod Laver, and they'll keep moving all the way up, which is to say, hey, I'm not one of these jackasses who think that the world of sports started in 1990, where it's just, I'll start with Michael Jordan and then we'll just go all the way up. We'll just box Michael Jordan and LeBron James and put everybody else in that era, in those two eras in between that, and that's how we'll come up with the greatest athletes of all time. I'm a little bit more broader, I'm a little bit more educated, I'm a little bit more sophisticated, I'm a little bit more refined, a little bit more open in terms of the interpretation of the greatest athletes of all time. So they'll show off that way, and then they'll high-five somebody, and then they'll tell the women how awesome they are and how big their dick is, and then they'll get on the floor and start dancing in the street like Martha and the Vandellas and dancing on the ceiling like Lionel Richie because they feel that they should have their face planted on a mountain because they're so wonderful and great with this knowledge that we just kicked off. I know Jack Johnson. I know about Jack Dempsey. I know enough about those guys to include them, Stanley Ketchel. I know about all of those guys, Major Harris. I know about all of those guys to really expand when we're speaking about the greatest athletes of all time. But yet and still, notice how I use that example of these clowns doing that type of stuff, but they don't use Billie Jean King. They don't include Althea Gibson. They don't include Margaret Court. They don't include Martina Navratilova. They don't include Steffi Graf. They don't include Cheryl Miller. They don't include Ann Donovan. They don't include Florence Griffiths Joyner. They don't include Babe Dickerson Zaharias. They don't include any of them folks. Well, they're women. They're women. Men bigger, faster, stronger. Well, if you're going to be comparing different eras, how in the world are you then going to be comparing an athlete from the 1920s and the 1930s to an athlete that's a century older? How can you equate Babe Ruth with Barry Bonds? If you're doing faster, bigger, stronger, which is the reason why I don't include any women when we speak about the greatest athletes of all time, well, then how are you going to compare? How are you going to compare 187-pound Joe Louis to 275-pound Tyson Fury? Well, I mean, well, come on, don't be ridiculous. I mean, Joe Louis did this, and Joe Louis did that, and Joe Louis, during his time, he had these records, and he had those records, and he was the Brown Bomber, and blah, 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 blah. Okay. I understand that. So if you can equate that, well, Jackie Robinson, he integrated baseball. He did this and he did that. He had a dynamic and he had a flair and he was athletic and da. Okay, if you're going to go ahead and do all those things, if you're going to put that into your definition of greatest athlete of all time, which is the reason why I can go back to the 1930s and 40s and 50s and include them when I'm speaking about athletes from the 21st century and athletes of today, if I can include the importance and the impact and the dominance they had during their era and playing time, why can't you do that for the women? Why can't you do that for the women? The point that I'm getting at, it might be harsh, we're just walking around brainwashed, is the fact that when I talk about Serena Williams, who is going to be retiring at the end of the U.S. Open, and it's going to be pretty quick. Serena, unfortunately, is not going to be a real threat to win the U.S. Open if she plays in the second round. That's awesome. I don't think she'll make it out of the first round. Maybe not. But second round, I'm guessing it's going to be the farthest she goes. We're speaking about Serena. Why can't we include her with the greatest athletes of all time for the knuckle-dragging Neanderthals who are too stupid to realize the impact and importance of women when we're speaking about the definition of greatest athletes of all time, and they want to include all of these other male athletes from different eras to put in as the greatest athletes of all time, putting them at the table. Why can't we have Serena Williams at the table? Why can't we have Diana Taurasi at the table? Why can't we have Althea Gibson and Wilma Rudolph at the table? They were great. They were dominant. They were impactful. When we speak about the greatest tennis players of all time, why can't we have the argument who's the greatest tennis player? When we always talk about greatest tennis player, we speak about Roger Federer, we speak about Rod Laver, we speak about Novak Djokovic, and we speak about Rafa Nadal. Where are the women? You can't include Steffi Graf? You can't include Martina Navratilova? You can't include Anne-Margaret Court? You can't include Serena Williams? Well, they're women, and if they played the men, then they would get blown out, and this, that, and the other, because men are bigger, stronger, faster, blah, blah, blah. Hey, whoa. You're the one that was sitting there talking about the reason why we can compare athletes to different eras because of the impact that they had on their sports. So why can't you include the women? So when I speak about Serena Williams and I speak about the impact that she had, she's the GOAT. Regardless, genderless, she's one of the GOATs. Now, I'm not going to get into the argument of ranking them. I don't play that game. I don't play the who's better, LeBron James, Michael Jordan bullshit. I don't do that. Don't do that crap. Don't do that nonsense. You're really going to try to compare Shaquille O'Neal to Bill Russell? You're really going to try to compare Elgin Baylor to Kawhi Leonard? You're really going to try to compare Babe Ruth to Willie Mays to Barry Bonds? We're really going to do that? Ichiro to Shohei Ohtani? We're really going to do that? Steve Carlton to Greg Maddux to, Justin Verlander to Tom Glavine? We're really going to do that? Why? What's the point? They're all great. I don't need a ranking. I don't need a list. I'm not qualified. You know what? Give it to those guys. Let those guys decide. They're more knowledgeable about this than me or you or anybody else listening to this podcast. Let them figure it out. If they want to say Bill Russell is the greatest, they want to say Michael Jordan is the greatest, fine. They want to say Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, or Serena Williams is the greatest, fine. But include women in the conversation and include them with respect. The respect that they deserve. Congratulations to the great Serena Williams, 23 Grand Slam championships, one of the greatest, regardless of gender. Congratulations on a wonderful career, and good luck to you and your husband as you are venturing into a new phase of your life in terms of starting a family. Her first daughter, which is now 5 years old, Olympia. I mean, there were some real complications with Serena during the birth of her child, so the doctors gave her the go-ahead. So at 40 years old, good luck to her. Good luck to her, and hope that she'll be continuing to do what she's been doing in terms of being a role model, in terms of being an icon, in terms of being a historical figure, in terms of having an impact on the society for all generations to come. Congratulations to the one and only Serena Williams. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. I'm good. I am done. I want to thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Again, if you like what you're listening to, I got to wake up in 8 hours, and I've got algebra class tomorrow with freshmen, so I got to get my rest, and I got to get myself mentally prepared for the tap dancing and for the performance that I got to give to get me through these days. Freshmen will do that for you, especially the first couple of weeks of school where they're still trying to figure out who they are. They were in 8th grade, started at the top, and now they're back to the bottom. So they're getting to know me. I'm getting to know them. So going to have to get some work done and get ready for that. So don't know how many highlights and all that good stuff I'm going to be putting in this. But I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. Again, if you want to subscribe, would very much appreciate it. Comment videos, negative, positive. Hey, man, leave out the racial slurs and have at it both ends of the spectrum. All right? And always, as I get on out of here, as I always say, come on, man, let's see what we can do to improve this society, improve this world that we live in. And how do we do that? We do that by listening to other folks. We do that by giving those folks who are different than us, whether we're speaking about race, whether we're speaking about gender, whether we're speaking about political affiliation in most parts, whether we're speaking about what side of the track that you're on financially, whether we're speaking about what side of the globe that you're coming from in this world, whether we're speaking about who do you love, what God do you worship, if you worship a God at all. Let's see what we can do about trying to respect one another, learn from another, take it and then move it down and teach our children and their children and their children, so maybe they can live in the world that we were hoping to live in, where we're really judged on who we are as human beings, not based on the color of our skin or where we're from or where we're living or who do we believe in and all that nonsense. If you got love in your heart, if you got goodness in your heart, if you got education, if you got tolerance in your heart, in your head, in your brain, that's what we need. This country's coming down to good and evil. Countries are coming down. We're going to have a civil war, good and evil, not black and white, not evangelicals and anybody else. It's going to be good versus evil. So what side are you going to be on? Hopefully it'll be decided good. Wendell Wallace, Wendell's World in Sports. Get me out of here with some music.